Here on RT International to discuss this decision. Well, first off, what are your thoughts? What's your impression of what's going on?
Well, it's shocking, but not surprising. It comes at a time when it's been obvious in Parliament and in the deep state that there is a state of anxiety about the growing influence and popularity of RT in the country. And this coincides with a simultaneous fall in the credibility of the British state broadcaster, the BBC. And the British don't like that. It throws a very sharp light on the BBC, that fewer and fewer people are watching it and less who are paying very much attention to what it says. It's just crude British state propaganda. So they've been nervous about RT for some time. And they've clearly decided on this.
RT has posed some serious competition to a lot of networks. But just looking at this particular situation that we have at hand here, we are waiting for some sort of explanation from the bank, and so far we haven't received any. So why is it that the bank hasn't come forward with any explanation so far? Why are they refusing to explain themselves?
Well, they haven't and they won't. And the answer is clear in your news package. This bank is owned by the British government. This is a decision taken by the British government. It flows from the discussions of the last few weeks about intensifying sanctions against Syria and Russia over what's happening in the Middle East, over what's happening in the Ukraine, what's happening on the international level. The British state has told this bank, which it owns, to close this account. It has the benefit for them of not being a formal break in diplomatic relations, but being a significant spanner in the works of Russia's preeminent broadcaster, RT. It means the British don't have to answer questions about it, and no one can force the bank to answer questions about it. So it's quite a cutely contrived spanner to throw in the works to show Russia of increasing levels of British unhappiness.
So, in other words, this decision reflects a not so rosy state of relationship between Russia and the UK, right?
There's been a long history of this. I don't want to tax your historical memory, but back in the early 1920s, the British government was invading Russian state property. Then Soviet state property, for example, was constantly breaching diplomatic norms in its relations with Russia. Britain even invaded Russia in the Civil War after the October Revolution. Britain has had bad relations with Russia for almost a century. And I think this is just another miserable chapter that the British have written into the history books. The good news is this is the 16th year of the 21st century. And no one, certainly not Boris Johnson, can stop the British people getting access to RT. And they will in increasing numbers.
Well, certainly our countries have enjoyed a very rich history. There were good pages in it and not so good pages, pages to be proud of, and some of the things that actually raise a lot of concern. But Mr. Galloway, just speaking of today's decision and what we are discussing, it's certainly unexpected, and the bank decision said, as our correspondent mentioned earlier, that the decision of the bank is not subject to revision. What does that mean? I mean, does that mean there's no room for maneuvering, there's no room for discussion, there's no room for legal procedures? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely none. The banks have in their financial articles and in the contracts that they have with clients that they can discontinue banking services, arrangements at any time without giving a reason. You can complain to the banking ombudsman but that's not what the paper it would be written on. No, this is a crude, brute decision by a British government-owned bank to cause a problem, not a great one, I think, for Russia and for RT. And they will not negotiate it, they will not revise it. You'll just have to find other bankers. And if you can't find other bankers, you'll just have to bank through Russian banks here in London. That's what I would do if I were you. But it does pose the question, what does Russia do vis-a-vis the BBC, the British state broadcaster? Are there grounds for retaliatory measures against the BBC in Moscow, in Russia? I would have thought yes. It's of course a matter for your president and for your government. But my knowledge of Russia, which is quite deep and quite long, is that Russia cannot be pushed around easily anymore. You talked about good pages. Of course, the Second World War, for a brief period, was a very glorious page. But since then, the only decent period of British-Russian relations have been when Russia was ruled by someone who allowed others to steal Russia's wealth. Now that Russia is governed by people who don't allow people to steal Russia's wealth, who don't allow people to humiliate Russia, well, I'm afraid relations commensurately soured.
Well, we've heard some harsh rhetoric coming towards Russia from the West and especially mainstream media, through the mainstream media, I should say. But, you know, just going to the situation, looking at the situation at hand here, what I know so far is there is an organization called the International Federation of Journalists, and they're saying that UK banks should publicly explain this decision to block accounts of RT broadcasters. So obviously there's going to be some pressure from international organizations on the bank for this decision. But George, just looking at what you said earlier and the hostility that there is towards Russian mainstream media in the West, for that matter, I just want to ask you how it all happened. I mean, obviously, kind of snowballed, escalated, and got to the point where we are now. I mean, 2 years ago, RT banners were taken down across London. What is the problem that the UK has with RT, apart from obviously what you mentioned earlier?
Well, the key problem, I repeat myself, is that RT has become extremely popular. At the same time as the British state broadcaster, the BBC, has become increasingly unpopular. If nobody was watching RT, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, and your bank account would still be open. You see, in the hypocrisy called Britain, not democracy, but hypocrisy, you're allowed freedom of speech as long as no one is listening to you. But as soon as a large number of people are listening to you and finding your take on things persuasive, more persuasive than the others, then that's when the alarm bells start ringing. That's when the spanners start being thrown in the works. And of course, other broadcasters have suffered this same fate. And I've been expecting, that's why I said at the beginning, it's shocking but not surprising, because I've been expecting something. I have seen from inside the Parliament, where I sat for almost 30 years, and outside, I've seen the mounting levels of concern about the growing popularity of RT, which matches Western broadcasters for professionalism, for production standards, for the quality of the journalism, everything. It just has a different take on the events, a parallel universe, actually. In this universe that I'm sitting in now in London, it's a great thing that Britain and America and Iraq are bombing Mosul to kill ISIS, but it's a big crime that Russia and Syria are bombing Aleppo to get rid of ISIS. How's that for a parallel universe?
Well, certainly, love it or hate it, RT has provided alternative source of information to a lot of viewers around the world, and the UK is no exception there. As some analysts say that what RT has done, it's broken the Western monopoly on information. Earlier the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, in response to the decision of NatWest to block RT's accounts, said that in voting to leave the EU, Britain had also left behind its freedom of speech and freedom of speech obligations, I should say. So my question to you now is, how much has Brexit already changed the UK?
Well, we haven't Brexited yet and might not even yet Brexit. Nobody knows about that. This is the British behaving as they do in the way that a scorpion behaves like it does, because it's a scorpion. And because we are, an albeit faded, imperialist power, we think with our big brother, Uncle Sam, we have the right to go around the world altering it in our own image as we please. And when anyone stands up against us, they become the new enemy, the new Hitler even. Can you imagine? The Russian people gave 27 million lives to actually defeat the real Hitler, but the president of Russia is routinely described in the British media as the new Hitler. Nothing could be more obscene a comparison than that. So Britain doesn't feel bound by any obligations of free speech, at least when that free speech is beginning to find an audience, is beginning to be heard and be persuasive. We are, of course, signatories of a whole number of conventions which guarantee freedom of speech and freedom of expression. That'll be one of the reasons why the British government have used a bank decision to throw this spanner in Russia's works, rather than they themselves take a decision to close RT in London. That would have been a very clear breach of international obligations. They're hoping to achieve the same result, but without the embarrassment of having to do that. But don't rule out that possibility too. If things get hotter over the next few weeks and months, even that kind of crime against the British people's right to information cannot be ruled out.
Well, George, we are awaiting for a formal explanation from the UK as to what happened today and why this happened, of course. But what a complex world we live in, to put it mild. I'd like to thank you very much for your